Mrs. Liu's question immediately pulled Heath back to reality. He reached out and touched his own face. He turned his head to hide the mark and replied, "It was an accident. There's no need for you here. Please head back downstairs." "Yes, sir." Mrs. Liu quickly nodded her head. She was annoyed with herself for being meddlesome. She turned around and walked away without glancing back. Heath stood there in a daze for a long time before he walked out of Melissa and Timothy's bedroom. He knew what he needed to do now was return to his room and give them their privacy. He wanted to make space for them so that they could spend some time together. While all of this was happening upstairs, Melissa excitedly flew downstairs to see Timothy. He was sitting on the sofa of the living room, staring at a spot on the rug, his face in a frown, as if he was troubled about something. Timothy clenched his fists. On impulse last night, he had sex with Anya, which made him feel extremely guilty. Last night, he was so angry and hurt that he lost himself in the passion of a torrid night with Anya until they both passed out with exhaustion. But before dawn arrived, Timothy suddenly woke up. With the faint light from the window of the small apartment, Timothy saw that Anya was still sleeping. He remembered that on that rainy night 4 years ago, he'd experienced the same thing. The difference was that when he came back, Anya had disappeared. She had been gone for 4 years. It was almost as if she was running away. Timothy put on his clothes and left a note for her before leaving in a hurry. Timothy's heart could not calm down until he reached his own home. Veins popped out on Timothy's fist. He did not know why it was so easy for him to lose control when he was around her. He clearly needed to keep her at a safe distance. When he had seen Anya so depraved and vulnerable, he responded due to a mixture of guilt and sympathy for her. He would always want to give her a hand when she needed it. He just couldn't help himself. But he did not think that she was so uncaring. Last night, not only did she not thank him, but she also kept refusing to listen, constantly pushing his buttons. And together, all of those factors had somehow caused him to make the same mistake again. Timothy helplessly closed his eyes. He had tried to make his best to make it up to her. This morning, on the way back home, he remembered that when Anya had quarreled with him last night, he had heard her mention that she lost her job because of him. Although he did not remember ever having anyone meddle with her employment, he wasn't in the right state of mind to investigate the accusation. Perhaps it was just a misunderstanding. Instead, he called his assistant and asked him to arrange Anya's return to work. With his endorsement, perhaps Anya's career path would be much more smooth. After Anya's career was stable, she would not have the need to accompany an old man like Derek Weston around. Hopefully, she would consider this an added benefit. "Honey, are you tired?" Melissa saw his vexed look and immediately sat beside him gently. She then stretched out her hand to gently massage his shoulder. Timothy, who had been deep in thought, was pulled back to the present by Melissa's gentle voice. He turned his head and looked at her oblivious face, and his mood became even darker. He had let Anya down 4 years ago, and now Melissa, whom he had always carefully protected, was going to be hurt. "I'm fine." Timothy forced a smile and then held Melissa's hands and said softly, "I'm not tired at all. However, you haven't been feeling well. You should rest." "I'm not tired either." Melissa shook her head. "It is just that you did not come back at all last night. I missed you a little." As she spoke, she reached out and hugged him. His body immediately stiffened. He felt awkward and somewhat panicky, so he pushed her away, though it left him feeling a little guilty. Last night he was with Anya. When he woke up this morning, he rushed back home in a hurry. He did not even have time to change his clothes or take a shower. Melissa had a sensitive nose, and he did not know if she had smelled something strange on him or somehow picked up on Anya's scent. "What is it?" Melissa, who had been pushed away, had a blank look on her face. Her beautiful eyes were like water waves, crystal clear and full of questioning. "No, it's fine." Timothy quickly stood up and avoided her eyes. He did not like to lie to her, and he never thought he would lie to Melissa one day. "Melissa, I came home mainly because I wanted to see you. I also needed to grab an important document. After I get it, I have to head back to work. Remember, get some rest." Timothy looked anywhere but her face as he spoke in a weak voice. "Is that so?" Melissa nodded acceptingly. She reached out and poured a glass of water for him and said, "In the future, if you have any matters like this, just ask your assistant Gary or your secretary Sue to come and get it." "You're right." Timothy nodded, never looking her in the eyes. He took a sip of water that Melissa handed him and said hurriedly, "I'll go upstairs and get my papers first." "Go on." Melissa had a gentle smile on her face. Timothy nodded awkwardly, turned around, and headed upstairs. Melissa stood where she was and stared at his retreating back. She watched him walk up the stairs one by one. The moment Timothy's bag disappeared from her sight, Melissa's expression changed. Timothy had been with another woman last night, and it was not platonic. Melissa had always paid close attention to Timothy. Because of Timothy's position, there were times when he had to talk business or attend a cocktail party, so he wasn't able to completely avoid the opposite sex. But because Timothy was always so honorable and self-disciplined, even if he had been around women, she knew it was of no consequence. But this time, Melissa's face still held a sweet smile, but her clenched fists turned white. Timothy had cheated on her. Her biggest fear had been realized. He had cheated on her. Melissa felt a heart-wrenching pain all over her body, causing it to tremble. Anger and hatred instantly filled her chest. Her normally beautiful face became sinister. Who was the woman who seduced her husband? Who exactly was she? Who snatched him away? Who was it? I want that woman to die an awful death. Just as she swore to drag that woman out and eat her alive, she suddenly heard Timothy's footsteps coming back down the stairs. Melissa immediately loosened her tightly clenched fists and went up to him with a smile. "Did you get what you needed?" "Yes, I got it." Timothy had just smoked a cigarette upstairs and changed into a new set of clothes. He had snagged a random piece of paper and walked down. "Well, hurry back to work. I know things are really busy. But even though things are so busy, we still need to make sure we are taking care of ourselves," Melissa said, and approached Timothy. She reached out and straightened his bow tie. "Okay, I will go back to work then." He looked at her but quickly averted his eyes. Although Timothy said he was going to leave, he did not move to go. The hand holding the document loosened and tightened. It was obvious he wanted to tell her something. "What's wrong? Something the matter?" Melissa faked naivety and looked at Timothy curiously. "Mel." Timothy met Melissa's eyes, wanting to tell her everything that had happened yesterday. He did not want to lie to his wife. Timothy reevaluated how to approach the topic. If Melissa knew about what happened, she would be angry, ranting and raving at him, threatening to never forget him. What should he do? Timothy, who had always been so decisive in the business world, found himself feeling extremely conflicted and full of remorse when facing her. "Tim, are you tired? Do you need a break from work?" She reached out and touched Timothy's cheek and asked with concern. "No, I'm fine." He moved Melissa's hand away from his face and said, "I'll go back to work for a while. Please rest." After he said that, he left the house without looking back. She followed behind him until he reached the door of the villa before stopping. She watched as he hurriedly walked away until he disappeared. Melissa could not hold back any longer. She covered her chest with her arms as her body shook twice with silent sobs. "Ma'am, what's wrong?" Mrs. Liu quickly went to her side to support her and asked worriedly, "Mrs. Godot, would you like me to call your private doctor?" "No need." Melissa waved her hand as she said weakly, "I'm just overly tired. help me to the bedroom to rest for a while." "Yes, ma'am." Mrs. Liu nodded and carefully helped Melissa to her room. She helped her lie down on the bed and carefully covered her with a blanket. "Thank you. That's all I needed. Call for my cousin over. I have something to discuss with him." Melissa lay down on the bed, her expression slightly eased. "Okay, ma'am. I will go do that now." Mrs. Liu quickly agreed and walked out of the bedroom. Melissa moved the cushion behind her and found a comfortable position to lie down again. She rubbed her temples, feeling like her head was going to explode. The smell she had picked up from Timothy's suit just now seemed to linger in her nose. It was repulsive. Melissa's beautiful eyes narrowed to a slit. She looked around the luxurious bedroom and her chest was once again filled with anger and unease. Timothy was with another woman. Since he had been with another woman, she felt that it was the first step that would lead to him abandoning her. She had to be prepared. Anyone who tried to snatch Timothy from me will die. "Mel, what's wrong? I heard Mrs. Liu said that you were dizzy." Before Heath arrived, his concerned voice reached the bedroom. "Why are you so noisy? I'm not dead yet," she snapped irritably. Heath did not care about Melissa's scolding, just as he did not care about the palm print on his face that had not yet dissipated. He quickly looked outside the door and closed it. He softly asked her, "What do you mean by die? Mel, be careful when you speak." Seeing Heath's marked face full of concern, Melissa nodded with satisfaction and a smile appeared on her face. "Heath, you are so good to me." "As long as you know it." Heath smiled. How could he not be good to her? She was the woman he loved the most in life. "By the way, Heath, what news of the matter that I asked you to handle last time?" She held his hand and used her index finger to gently stroke his palm. He thought for a moment. He asked, "Are you referring to the matter at Leslie's birthday banquet?" "Yes." "It's more than likely been handled." Heath nodded and said, "Although I don't remember what the woman looked like, after I returned to the company that night, I investigated her identity. She seemed to be from the design department of Sunderby Styles. I called David Hendricks a few days ago. I think that she's been fired by now." Heath paused for a moment and said, "It's just that you haven't been in good health these last few days. I've been 100% focused on taking care of you. I didn't call Hendricks to confirm that the matter had been settled, but it shouldn't be much of a problem. If you're worried, I can call and ask him right now." "No need." Melissa stopped Heath. She did not care about the woman she met with Tim at the cocktail party. What she cared about the most was the woman who had slept with him last night. "I have more important things that I need you to do," she exclaimed, and she held Heath's hand tightly, a sad expression appearing on her face. "I promise I'll do anything you ask of me," Heath said seriously. "Heath, do you know, Timothy, he... Before Melissa finished speaking, a crystal clear teardrop fell from her eye and fell onto the back of Heath's hand. He saw that she was crying and immediately panicked. He gently wiped away the tears on her face and asked, "Mel, don't cry. What happened? Was he mean to you?" Tim, he... Melissa did not say anything. She just kept crying, which made Heath's heart ache. "Mel, don't cry anymore. I can't bear it. Tell me what I can do. I will do whatever you want me to." He was at a loss for what to do. He pulled her into his arms and kept muttering, "Mel, don't cry. Don't cry." Mel saw his anxious look and sobbed a few more minutes before she stopped crying. She lay in Heath's arms and looked up at him. Her voice was very sad. "Heath, you know, Timothy cheated." "What?" A wave of fury immediately rushed through him. Timothy was an animal. How could he do this to her? Melissa was so good to him. He actually dared to cheat on her. "Heath, I'm so scared. I'm really scared. I'm afraid Timothy doesn't want me anymore," Melissa said and started to cry again. "Mel, how could he not? Timothy being able to marry you has brought him so much happiness and joy. He won't reject you." Heath comforted her in a soft voice. Deep in Heath's heart, he longed for Melissa to love him like this. No matter what the situation, he would always protect her and be by her side. Even if the person she loved most was Timothy, it did not matter. As long as he could be with her, it would be enough. "But I am still afraid. What if Timothy doesn't want me anymore? What should I do?" Timothy reached out and grabbed his shirt. She cried and said, "Heath." She cried and said, "Heath, only you can help me now. I'm begging you. Please help me. Okay?" "Anything for you." He hugged her tightly. Love for her shone in his eyes, and there was a firm determination in his response. "Really?" Melissa's eyes were filled with tears as she looked at Heath with hope. "I need you to pull off something major here. It's for the sake of my marriage."